It's been a while since I did a glory story, but I feel like this will be a great fit for the channel. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want more of these glory stories, and let's jump right into it. Our group once had the bro-liest Paladin Barbarian ever. His name was Ozzmarr, the half-orc paladin of insert homebrew god of fair fighting here. Ozmarr's background was that he was a member of a Barbarian tribe that had been given as a baby as a gift to a missionary by his tribe, as a sign of peace between tribes, to go on to marry one of their leader's daughters. Since the church leader had no daughters, he made him a son of the cloth, so to speak. Now, Ozzmarr wasn't that bright, but he was as strong as a team of oxens, used a two-handed club bigger than most men, and could, given time and effort, find evil simply by watching the entire world, picking up the man who detected as evil and then bellowing at him without stopping for hours on end until the guy broke down. He was utterly patient and unstoppable by any normal means beyond total bodily dismemberment in his pursuit of justice. His class was basically the DM choosing to ignore alignment requests. So he was a paladin with levels in a homebrew paladin barbarian prestige class, which broke down to Rage Against the Dying Light. Now, this was in a game with mostly true neutral and evil people. Only he and I were actually good. I was a chaotic good cleric rogue, ex-gang member turned to god who spent most of his time boozing and barding, but who had also been assigned to Ozzmarr to keep him out of trouble. The other player characters included a chaotic evil blackguard girl, a true neutral druid, a neutral evil assassin who had huge daddy issues with the lawful evil monk of the god of tyrants. We met when they were sent to hunt us down and stop me preaching the word. Ozzmarr beat each of them unconscious and, for some reason, got it into his head that, since they were still alive after he'd beaten them, our god wanted them alive and to change their ways. Over the course of the game, he slowly, through sheer stubborn-ass will, turned them up the alignment spectrum, the monk became lawful good, and dropped his god for ours. The assassin took a few levels in Ranger, and Ozzmarr as the father he never had, if his dad had been 6'8" and green. The druid remained the same, but stopped twerking for a-holes. The blackguard, though, she was the most entertaining to watch. You see, her player wasn't an ass, but he was a power gamer, and he took flaws he never thought would come into it. One day early on, we came across her home village. Ozzmarr leading the procession in chains, and keeping an eye on the criminal scum to avoid any incidents. We go to the inn, buy a room, and the innkeep takes one look at the blackguard, blanches, and leaves in a hurry. Tells us to take the room for free. 10 minutes later, there's a mob outside. Apparently, the blackguard has a real angsty background involving her brother being a dick to her and etc, etc. Needless to say, when she left a mark on several people in the village, including the mayor's son, who was a prick and one of the main reasons she was a self-serving, black-hearted dick. Ozzmarr goes outside to see what the fuss is. They demand her head. Ozzmarr takes one look at the crowd and says, "No, she is mine and I will teach her to be good." The crowd is incredulous and demands proof. Ozzmarr carries her outside over his shoulder. Ozzmarr puts her down next to him and in front of the crowd takes off her chains and says, "Say you're sorry for what you did to them." "Never." "Say you're sorry for what you did to them. You hurt a lot of innocent people, apparently." "I couldn't care less how many innocent people we hurt." Crack. As he backhands her across the stage and then walks over and picks her up by the shoulders, looks her straight in the eyes and yells, "Say you're sorry for hurting the innocent." Ozzmarr has a very high intimidate. Ozzmarr rolls a 19. Ozzmarr is an effing scary half-orc sometimes. She bends in the face of his righteous glory for a second, says, But what did, I'm sorry, but what he did to me." "What who did?" "The mayor's son." Ozzmarr turns towards the crowd and uses Detect Evil. 3 people turn up, the mayor, his son, and the head of the guard. Turns out the plot hook for this was that the mayor was meant to hire us to go hunt down some ex-convicts, who were actually people who had smacked his son about for screwing with their girlfriends after drugging them, so forth. And that the blackguard had the masochist disadvantage as their flaw. She failed a will save and became obsessed with Ozzmarr and his backhand of justice. And Ozzmarr was one of the first people to actually listen to her when she said things like, "The mayor's son is a prick." So the obsession, the player decided, being a god tier role player with no sense of shame when in character, was going to fall in love with Ozzmarr, which Ozzmarr didn't notice until about 15 sessions later when she confessed. Ozzmarr's reaction, he sat there for a while and looked at the now true neutral ex-blackguard and simply said, "If you learn to behave and be good, and you can ask nicely, I might spank you." Then nodded and continued on his way. By the end of the game, she was a paladin of that S&M god, and in the final encounter, when she was offered a place at the big bad evil guy's side if she turned her back on the party, she didn't because of Ozzmarr and his sexy half-orc love. Ozzmarr effin' rock. And then there's a part 2, which the writer here hints at, about a confrontation with a lawful evil tyrant who challenged him to an honorable duel. And based on what we saw earlier in the story, his god is a homebrew god, a god of fair fights. So that's going to be very interesting to see what happens. It begins like this. Well, the big bad evil guy from the game was a lawful evil king-turned-tyrant, being backed up by the god of tyrants, a long-forgotten god, which basically means he wasn't worshipped actively, but anyone who was a tyrant counted as a worshipper of his, despite worshipping other gods, so he got auto-cleric levels. The game was all about Ozzmarr, and I was going to this new unknown country to try and spread the word of a religion at the start, until we realized their king was a dickhead of the greatest magnitude, at which point Ozzmarr got disgruntled by the evil in the air around him and decided he was going to turn the country around. And the rest of us were all going along for the ride of the righteous tidal wave that was Ozzmarr. After many epic adventures, the game comes to a climax with a revolt led by Ozzmarr, me, and the ranger assassin in the capital city, which pretty much failed. We were stuck behind a barricade, with the king's men raining hell down on us for days on end, us giving almost as good as we got, but there's too many of them, you know how it works. When Ozzmarr sees the king watching from the sidelines and bellows a challenge for leadership of the country at him. One of the king's laws was that you could challenge anyone for anything, might makes right. Now his entire army hears this challenge and obviously they know he can't back down from it. So the king says, sure, whatever, get my effing huge sword and armor and let's do this. Then your entire revolt is mine. Circle is drawn in neutral ground, the two parties meet with the ex-Blackguard as Ozzmarr's second, and the king's general as his second. Now the thing about this king and his relationship with his god was he was the last tyrant alive at this time. And if there are no worshippers of a forgotten god, they're gone for good, and a new one will appear when and as they are needed. And Ozzmarr is an effing god fighter. So this god is shitting enough bricks to build New York. He tells the king to cheat, takes over him, and puts on a few poisoned rings. When he shakes Ozzmarr's hand, minus 10 to strength and constitution, as well as being blinded and a few other mixed nasties in the form of liquid curses. Ozzmarr's greatest abilities down the drain. Before Ozzmarr can call out his treachery, the king smacks him in the gob with his pommel and the fight begins. Ozzmarr does his best, but needless to say, he's getting effed up bad. When the God King makes the mistake all tyrants make, he starts gloating, going on about how they are weak and pathetic and don't deserve protection, about how men are wolves and he's the biggest MF and alpha wolf there is, about how God is stupid, honors restraint, and respect for others is pathetic. Ozzmarr is annoyed at the puny man dissing on his principles. Ozzmarr pulls a trick we've not seen in months of leveling because he's never needed it. Ozzmarr righteous rages. Feats kick in, results are rolled, tables brought out. Ozzmarr is healed back on full health, basically sweats the poison out, and gives off a bellow that sends half the king's men running away with liquid fear running down the insides of their legs. A man possessed by God itself stumbles at this bellow, this roar of anger against the sheer injustice of the world, the fury against darkness he and the man he possessed represent, that malicious evil that thinks it can get away with things because good men won't fight back or aren't smart enough to fight them. And then Ozzmarr brings up his weapon and stands over the fallen king for a moment before saying 5 words. Get up and face me. He waits until his opponent stands and then swings his club into him, breaking his entire shield arm in one hit as he tries to protect himself. The king screams out for his troops to fire on the battlefield. They do so. Ozzmarr asks the GM if he can roll Divine Intervention. He fails, but uses a once-a-day item to reroll and passes. The arrow and bolts stop midair, and the general tries to enter the arena and is boiled into his armor by the fire of the line that surrounds them, effectively disintegrating him in his suit as the god of fair battle himself looks down on this betrayal of his greatest warrior and goes, "No, this shall be a fair fight." Ozzmarr brings his weapon in again and drives the crowned helmet so deep into the man's head that it could never be removed from the body of the armor again, then stands bellowing in the circle. The god of tyrants tries to escape, taking no physical form, but Ozzmarr grapples and starts hitting it using Smite Evil, literally holding and beating down a dying god in a dueling ring using nothing more than the force of his own righteousness and hatred of evil, and punches it in its evil face until it stops spasming and finally disperses away. Ozzmarr was now king. Ozzmarr took the crown, that his new generals offered him, and he looked and then nodded and said, "I'm not smart enough to be king." Ozzmarr gave this away to his church, creating a council of 12 members, 6 clergymen and 6 randomly chosen peasants, who each served for a maximum time. And he went back to the road. When asked why turn down this great offer, this chance to be a king, and have everything he wants, he answered, "Because I do not need it. I have all I wish here. It is my place to fight evil face to face, not as a figurehead. I have evil before me, my weapon at my side, and good and just friends to battle alongside, and the war eternal to battle in the name of my God. What more could make me happy?" Ozzmarr then moves on with us, all being dragged along in his wake. What happens next? I don't know. We're continuing the campaign in a few weeks, after GM has a chance to rest and plan. And that concludes the story of Ozzmarr, the Bro-liest of Paladins. Now, in the future, if I'm able to find more stories about this awesome paladin, I'm definitely going to try to cover it. But these were the 2 that I found in this thread, and it's just magical. I love seeing an arc of an unconventional character really go full circle, and when given the chance to really, retire the character, they always find another way to get back into the fray. Like what the Bro-liest of Paladins would want to do, right? Ozzmarr strikes me as the kind of guy who wants to die in battle, and die for a righteous sacrifice, more than just being a boring king. Thanks for stopping by. I really liked covering the glory stories, and I hope to see you in the next video. Farewell for now. Community shoutout time. Thank you Apocalypso, Deadly Plays, Alfonso, and Bloodsmith Gamer. Thank you for making this all possible with your support.